I was hacking on an application lately, and I thought that I had basically exhausted all the scope that I wanted to hack on. I couldn't find any new features. I had used all my methodologies that I talked about in the previous video to try and find new features, but I wasn't really finding anything, so I thought to myself, well, it's probably time to move on, right? Then I found something, an endpoint in the JavaScript files that I wasn't able to find anywhere on the main application. And I thought to myself, where is this feature? I hadn't seen it before, and I felt like I had tested everything else already. And then soon enough, I started digging a little bit more into the JavaScript files, and I started finding more and more features that I wasn't seeing inside the application. And I thought, where are all these endpoints coming from? Well, the answer was that they were locked behind a feature flag, which is the topic of today's video. Okay, but first of all, what actually is a feature flag? Well, a feature flag is something that prevents certain elements of the UI from appearing, certain features from JavaScript from appearing in the UI, depending on the tier of the user we're logged in as. For example, this is the most common example you'll see in most websites, is you'll have a normal user, maybe it's like a free user, or it's like the lowest tier you can have, basically like the lowest subscriber tier. And they see this UI here. This is just like the normal like free features of the app, the stuff that everyone sees. However, if you upgrade in the app, suddenly you might see extra stuff appearing, right? You might have this feature here, maybe this is like an LLM chatbot feature that only like the highest paying subscribers can see. And the important thing is that in a feature flag, the JavaScript file remains the same for both users. Both users can actually see these features, but it only appears in the UI of like one of these users, and one of these users can actually like interact with the features. And yeah, the JavaScript file is the same. So note that these features, they're actually accessible from both of these JavaScript files, but only one user can actually see the UI for it. That's basically what a feature flag is. And some other things about it is that, yeah, I talked about this before, it gates features behind user tiers, and it's client-side controlled. That means it's essentially user input because it's trusted from the browser. JavaScript in general, just on the browser, is client-side controlled, so we can control that JavaScript. We can change variables whenever we want to. It often tends to be controlled by some like cookies or local storage, or some kind of response that might come in from the server. And these are all things that we can tamper with as the user and that we can unlock. So this is not a security mechanism, right? So this isn't something that's going to prevent your feature from being used. If we go back here, if a normal user wanted to, they could try out the features of the paid user, and it's up to the server to block them from doing that based on the session that they're logged in as. Basically, hiding the feature behind like JavaScript is not a defense that's actually used, right? Although in practice it sometimes is. Well, since these feature flags appear in JavaScript anyway, what's the point of even like actually trying to trigger them, right? Can we just recreate the request from JavaScript? Well, it's not as simple, right? Although I do mention that the request appears in JavaScript, it often looks like this. This is often what this request will look like. And this just isn't very pretty, right? And trying to recreate this request would be genuinely so much work that I don't think it's worth it most of the time. Just because this minified JavaScript looks awful. And even when you have the exact endpoint that you need to target, for example, use like a link finder, a JavaScript bookmarklet or something like that, and you manage to get back the endpoints, even if you found one of those endpoints, what's the body supposed to be? If it's like a JSON endpoint, then what kind of parameters do you need to pass in there? What kind of headers need to go in there? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and it can be quite time consuming to do all that, especially when you have to read this, which just looks terrible. That's why wouldn't it just be a lot easier if the JavaScript did all that work for us? If we could just trigger the UI to display the feature for us so that it would basically recreate the request by itself. That would be the optimal scenario, which is why I believe that looking for these feature flags is well worth the time investment than trying to read through this and trying to recreate the feature yourself. That's why I think that we should really prioritize feature flags. And basically, these are the two reasons why we want to look for them. It's just a simple way to test if access control is enforced server side. So if you have a paid user and you wanted to test if that paid user is actually being enforced on the server side, you would just trigger the feature flag to become the paid user, and then you would basically click all the buttons as the the free user to see if any of them work. That's what I would basically do, and it's just super fast to test it without having to sit there and like get every single request or like enumerate this and whatever. That's a really good thing. And then also, it's a test endpoint that other hackers have failed to reconstruct from JavaScript. Sometimes I see scenarios where companies will deploy features early to JavaScript, and they'll create a feature flag where basically, if you're a kind of like a trusted customer, you'll get this feature flag that will enable these experimental or like beta features for you, and you'll gain access to new features early. If you can trigger that feature flag on the client side, you might find that you can test features that haven't been released yet. There's no documentation for, and that they just basically exist in JavaScript at the moment. But they're not shown to all the normal users. If you can trigger something like that, then you'll be able to access these features and test them before other bug bounty hunters have tested them, and importantly, before even the company's own security team might have tested them, which is very important for us. And that will get us bugs. I'll get us more bugs than trying to look at these hardened features that have already been tested before. If you watch my video about my 2025 bug bounty review, I mentioned that I was going to focus on testing new features more because they consistently bring more bounties and features that have already been tested. And this is, I think, a great way to do it. And now I'm going to hop into a live example where I show you how a feature flag might work on a small application that I built myself. And just before I hop into the live example, I've actually updated my lab website to actually show all the previous labs that I've talked about before. I turned on what's called directory listing, so you can go on to this labs directory, and then you can access all like the previous labs that I've created before. With this post message one, we can go into post message, we can go into main.html, and you can see all the files that are involved in this. So you can start testing like that. You can test like popup.html. I don't even know what this does. Whatever, you get the point. So you can rewatch my previous videos and you can follow along with the labs, or you can just try out the labs yourself now. You can go on and try and find some vulnerability or whatever. Also see the packages that I've used. Here I've used like the basically WebSocket library for PHP, and you can see the composer and stuff like that. So it might be helpful if you're testing basically what kind of packages and stuff you're on there. And yeah, that's basically what I've updated here. This is the live example that I've built for us today, and it's just going to be a showcase of how, one, we can access the premium features in the website, so how we can manipulate kind of part of the JavaScript to access the premium features, and then how we might be able to access a beta feature as well. So we have this website. Currently we have no premium access apparently. It's a bit sad. But let's see. For example, the network tab will build this request, and we see a few requests being made, and one of them loads in. So that's main.php is being loaded. Then we have a JavaScript file being loaded, and then we have this request to billing.php. We'll see the response, and you see it's a JSON response where premium is set to false. Cool. Maybe we'll hop into a HTTP proxy instead. I don't like the Chrome network tab very much. Hop in here. We'll say load that, and we'll refresh the page here. We'll just send a couple of these through, and we see billing.php. Let's have a look at this first, right? And this returns a request where premium is set to false. And this is important, I think, because this is being sent by the JavaScript file that we loaded in before. That means that this is being read, and it's going to interpret this. And whenever I see something like this, where it's like premium is set to false, or like enabled is set to false, or something like this, what I really recommend doing is creating a match and replace rule to change this false to true, and then just see what happens, right? This is only being read by JavaScript. We know that because it's not taking us anywhere, and it was fetched directly after the JavaScript was loaded, so it must be interpreted by the JavaScript file somehow, and it might influence the actual look of the website. So if you have AI, you can just press this button here. Something I've been using is Shift AI, it's from Kaido, and you can just say create a match and replace rule, that changes the JSON response from false to true in this request. I'll send it something like that. Hopefully this will work. We'll see what Grok comes up with. Hopefully we don't have to make it ourselves. And it's going to generate it there. Cool. Made something. Let's have a look at it. That doesn't look very good. God damn it, Grok. Okay, let's just change this to. Okay, let's just get rid of all these things. Oh, damn AI. Okay, I'm gonna do this, and that's gonna set it to premium is true. It's just because it gets confused with the white space sometimes, unfortunately. I guess AI is not replacing me yet. Okay, cool. Hopefully that match and replace rule will work. We've set that. I've enabled it. Yes, I have enabled it. And then if you refresh the page, okay, right. Okay, after a little bit of effort, I've managed to fix it. Turns out if you're using Kaido, you have to click this button, sources intercept, for some unknown reason. You have to click that checkbox and then it'll work. Anyway, I've set up the match and replace rule now, which is going to change premium to true. Then we're going to refresh the page, and you're going to see that now the page thinks we're a premium user because we modified the response. This doesn't actually mean that we are, right? So this isn't a way to, privilege escalate to a premium user. This is just basically manipulating the front end to make it believe that we are a premium user. But if the website has proper access control enabled, we should not be able to use the premium features, right? It should verify our session and say, no, you are actually not a premium user, so you can't use this feature anyway. Basically, trusting the client is no in Bounty, so we don't want to do that. But anyway, we managed to upgrade ourselves to a premium user, and then we can now click this button. Maybe there's like a load of different buttons here that we can start clicking, messing around with. Most of them will probably deny us, but maybe some of them will actually accept us. Through this button, we'll get this nice little alert box. You have accessed a premium feature with broken access control, and then it's going to take us to some premium page. So we found a broken access control vulnerability by upgrading our feature flag. Sorry, my labeled. Is it? I don't know why it's buffering then. Weird. Let's go back. That's one of the ways we can do it. We can find out through the requests by monitoring the requests and by creating a match and replace rule, whether using AI or just manually doing it, which is probably going to be faster at this point. Anyway, we can do that. We can upgrade ourselves to a premium user. Some other ways feature flags could be stored, importantly, is down here through the cookies, which is another one you're going to see experiments false. I'll get that in a minute. Sometimes they're stored to the session ID. If they're stored in the session ID, like server side, then you're not going to be able to change it, because if the feature flag is stored on the server side, then you're not really going to be able to do it like that, unless you can basically like change it somehow and some other response or whatever. You can have session storage. You can have it in the local storage. So the big one, you could have another, like a different JavaScript file storing the information in the local storage, and then a different JavaScript file could be reading that information off. So if you change the information in the local storage, then you can manipulate what the feature flag actually is as well. It's a big thing to look out for. Remember that in your browser, it's just going to be in the storage tab. I don't know where it is in Chrome, but this is where it is in Firefox anyway. And then a database. I don't know if it'll be in the database, but you might as well check it. And then obviously, big one is cookies. I don't think it'll be in the cache either. So those are kind of the main places. Is local storage and cookies is where the other one is. And then in responses stored basically. And then in responses sent by the server, where the JavaScript will be interpreting whether or not you're a free or paid user, whether you have access to some kind of other beta features or whatever. Okay, we had this one. Experiments is false. Well, that's pretty obvious what happens if we just set it to true. Let's set experiments to true. I'm going to have to disable something. Hold on. Because I was too lazy to code it in. I'm going to have to disable the premium feature for now. And we'll just refresh. We'll become a free user again. And now we have an experimental feature coming up here. This is a feature that is currently in development, as we see here. And just by triggering the cookie, we have gotten access to this feature. Now this is a server-side feature, so this isn't something that comes up in the JavaScript, I believe. If we go to the JavaScript and analyze it, yeah, we don't see this experimental feature thing in the JavaScript. That means that this is a server-side feature flag, which probably should be enforced by the server. Basically, something like this should be enforced by the server if it's not stored in the client-side JavaScript. Just for the simplicity of making this lab, I decided to make it server-side. Just because most applications nowadays are web-packed and they're like chunked and they have like this massive like one-page JavaScript file, then most of the features will be stored inside one JavaScript file, because it's just such a pain in the arse for developers to try and send different features to different tiered user that most developers don't bother with them. But most of the time, they'll just send the exact same JavaScript file to the free user as to the paid user, which is what these feature flags basically are. And once you get access to this experimental feature here, then we can start testing it and start finding better scope. I hope you enjoyed this video about JavaScript feature flags. It's a pretty useful gadget for testing features that are just being rolled out by the company, or features that are locked behind a paywall but that still exist in the JavaScript and that most hackers really weren't arsed to test at the moment. It might give you just the edge to squeeze out a few vulnerabilities in features that weren't really thoroughly tested yet. Also, apologies for the lack of video last week. I was a little bit sick. I'm still not 100% to be honest. Yeah, I live in Ireland, so it's just constantly raining at the moment. It's no sunlight either, so it's pretty miserable at the moment, and I've just been getting sick a lot, which is a bit annoying, but I'll try to keep posting the videos for you, and I'll keep you updated on my bug bounty progress as well. And yeah, anyways, thanks for watching, and happy hunting.